I was widowed in 1999. My husband was in a car accident, a single car accident, and he was 27. And I had two little boys. I had a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I had a Mustang convertible now as my only vehicle to drive around in Colorado in February. And sorry, my son is now in there making dinner. Sorry, the timer's going off. And so, which I could not even get the car seat in and out of without putting the top down on the car. So, obviously I had to do something about that right away, make some big decisions right away. But I went back to school to learn what I could learn about how to help my family. I was really worried about my kids. And I ended up I went to a grief group, and they were mostly 85-year-old people, maybe who had some long-term illness that they were dealing with, a hospice group. Then they sent me to try this newly single group, which, as you can imagine, was of people who were divorced and didn't have the same kind of feelings about their former partner that I did. And so I went back to school and took a family communication class and really learned a lot. And that's what made me decide to go back to school and get my degrees in communication. And then in 2011, I connected with Michelle. I actually saw an article about Camp Widow in USA Today. And I didn't know it at the time, but Dana, who's now the director of operations, she said almost the same thing. Like, she had gone to these help groups, these self-help groups or whatever, these therapy groups, and they just didn't have the same experience that she did. They were older adults, or it was, they were just not having the same experience, and she didn't find good support groups. And I thought, these are my people. I've been looking for them. I didn't know it for like 10 years, And so I called Michelle, or emailed her, and asked her if I could come do my dissertation research at camp. And so my widow tribe helped me get my PhD. And one of the things that I do is try to give back like this. And I work at Shriner University as a communication professor. And also, I'm the research director for Soaring Spirits Resilience Center at Shriner University. So if you've taken surveys about resilience, then thank you so much. I mentioned this before, but I've just received some emails even in the last week that resilience scale that we created is being used all over the world and translated into different languages. So it's pretty cool. So anyway, great work, and I appreciate it. So one of the things that we learned about resilience through our research and asking widowed people what made them feel resilient was this thing about integration. So being able to honor your past while being present today, crafting a meaningful future, just integrating this part of your life that was your late partner in with who you are now and into making these plans for the future. And one of the things I kind of suspected from the very beginning was, I said, I think there's something to being able to hold like a new love in your life and your late partner, a love for your late partner, without giving up either one of those things, right? And so it's the same thing with any of our history and our past and our present. We can hold those things. We bring all of that with us, right? So moving beyond even just new partners or previous partners, really that holds true all the way across our lives. Being able to call from our past into our present to make decisions or learn about ourselves, and then kind of help guiding us to the future. So we'll go to the next slide. So integration is really combining one thing with another so they become whole, right? And so how cool is that when you think about it? Sometimes in a way that doesn't happen with any other loss in our life or anything else about our past, usually, people sometimes ask us to just leave that behind, right? I don't want to hear you talk about them anymore. Aren't you done talking about them? Can't you just move on? Maybe you'll just get over it, right? Or maybe if you do this, then you'll get over it. And nobody would say that about your grandmother, right? If you're talking about your grandmother who had passed away, they wouldn't say, I'm so tired of hearing you talk about your grandmother, right? We don't do that with any other relationship in our life, but for some reason we do with this. And what we learned, and what we want widowed people to even be able to tell people in their lives, is that's actually not healthy for me. I know that to be resilient, I need to incorporate all of this. This is all my whole. This is all of this makes me a whole person. And so integration is a really cool concept for that. Next slide. So I just told you this. This is one of the key elements to being resilient. and being able to kind of balance and integrate all three of these things at the same time. So we're going to talk about each of them one at a time. So we'll start with the past, a little bit about what the research says, sorry, next. So having a balanced time perspective, and there's this thing, it's called time perspective theory, that was actually created by a scholar who at the time was not widowed, but she is now, and she uses it actually to talk about grief, but that's not how she created it. So it was really cool. We've been talking about this time perspective theory for a couple of years now in our presentations, and Michelle was looking up something and saw that this woman is now widowed, and we connected with her a couple months ago, and she's using this time perspective theory to really talk about grief. So really a balanced time perspective is the ability to hold the past, the present, and the future perspectives concurrently, and this is key too, to be able to kind of be flexible about moving between them whenever is most appropriate for your situation. So being able to balance that leads to increases in happiness and mindfulness. And after we talk about this, if you want to learn more about it, they have all kinds of materials out there on using time perspective theory to deal with grief. So just something to think about. Okay, so next slide. So the power of the past. The past is really great, and I think that Michelle too, when she talked about it this morning, is really great for reminding us who we are and where we came from. But also, she said, you know, going through this experience that we're going through now, where we're sheltering in place, so we're social distancing, our widowhood is something that we can really call upon, because we know we've already had our worlds turned upside down, and we figured out that we could go through that, and we have some tools that we learned from that that are coming in really handy right now, right? And so the past gives us some perspective as far as how far we've come, but also helps us to learn from our successes. And also, we were talking about in the decision-making panel, for some of you who are in there, that we've made decisions in the past that weren't so great. And we learn as much from those decisions, right, as we learn from the really good ones. And so learning from what's been successful for us before, and then, you know, where we've maybe gone a little bit off track. And then also thinking about the past, and I love this kind of turn of phrase, but valuing the innocence of ignorance. So thinking back to that innocent perspective you had when grief hadn't touched your life yet, and just the values that you had in the world, and the way that you looked at the world and the perspective, and maybe some of that has changed for the better since you were widowed, and maybe some of that has maybe gotten a little more pessimistic. And so remembering that innocence of ignorance, because it gives us our identity and our sense of belonging, right? Okay, so next slide. So any of the activities where we're honoring the past, any memorial activities, are ways that we spend time in that time perspective. Anything that we do to honor, remember, thinking about how far you've come, visiting this other time orientation. This is from the National Fallen Firefighters Monument. This doesn't have to be this formal though, right? It can be like buying your person's favorite cereal, or just like something happens and that makes you remember them and you go, hi honey, you know, just those little flashbacks. So how much time we spend in these memorial activities. So some other examples of these past oriented activities are on the next slide. And there's also a picture of a notebook, because I want you to get out your journal or a piece of paper, but you have those journals, right, that you got from Soaring Spirits, and start to jot down what are some of the things that you do that are past oriented, past focused. So traditions, rituals. Think about your family history, you know, maybe like it doesn't necessarily have to be about your person, it's your whole life. So like at the holidays, we make lefse because my family's Norwegian, and that's something that, you know, it's a tradition that we've had for our because tells me about where I've come from. So write down some things about what do you do, what are some activities that you like to do where you're spending time in your past orientation, maybe looking through old photos, old movies, old videos, looking through Facebook at Time Hop or something, and maybe sharing some things that you really like to do that you find really comforting about your past oriented activities, either in the chat or, as I said, please unmute yourself and share. We only have 8 people in here, so we have plenty of room for talking. So what are some of the things that you all really like to do that give you comfort, that you find comfort in your past-oriented activities? Maybe we have a quiet group.
I think one of the things that we do at Christmas, and it really started with my daughter doing it, she came in not this past Christmas, but a year ago and said, "Where is Daddy's stocking? Why isn't it hanging by the fireplace?" And I said, "Well, I just kind of thought that after 7 years, maybe it bothered people." And she said, "I'm sorry, what do you care about what other people think?
Mm-hmm.
Daddy's stocking needs to be on the fireplace. Where is it?" So she went out and got it and came back in. And together we decided to place a yellow rose in it, which was his favorite, for each one of
Oh,
the family members that year. And so this year there was a new grandchild, so there was an additional yellow rose in the stocking this year. And so that's what we do. And so that's just kind of a way of remembering him and his favorite holiday.
what a fun tradition. What a beautiful tradition, right? So you're incorporating that with your life, your current, right? Your present, because you also have the rose from the grandchild.
Exactly. There's a
Very
rose representing each member of the family. So as the family grows, I don't know what, I mean, hopefully there's not going to be too many more, but yeah, then we'll just, we'll put another rose in the stocking for each new family member that joins us.
Yeah, so you just bring him right along with you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Very nice. I like that one. Anybody else have something that they really like to do, they're finding comforting? Because probably something that you're thinking of, maybe somebody else wouldn't have thought of. And maybe some of us are looking for some more ideas. I know some people like to bake, like make their favorite food still at the holiday, even though no, it's not really anybody else's favorite. Don't even have to tell everybody, right? It's just it's something to help them remember. Anybody else want to share anything? Are you feeling shy? Oh, okay, so we can go on. Oh yeah, go ahead,
I'll do
Sandy.
one more really quickly.
Yeah.
This is also at the holidays, but I think it's kind of a remembering as well as an honoring my current, and that is he was a photographer. So I hang at Christmas time a wreath on my living room wall, and I have an ornament. The first year I bought for each of the kids and I an ornament of a 35mm camera. So that's where I put um, my camera ornament. And through the year, I gather ornaments from places that I've done or things that I've done that I wish he and his camera could have captured for me.
Oh yeah.
And those ornaments hang on that wreath in the living room every year. And then the next year, that year's ornaments are on the tree, and I put whatever new ones I might have gathered along the way. So, a grandchild's first Christmas ornament, a bride and groom ornament when their daughter got married, those kinds of things go on to that. To anybody else that walks into my home, it's, wow, I never thought of doing that. What a cool, put a wreath and hang a few ornaments on it. But to me, it's honoring his photography and
Right.
bringing him along on the doing the things that I'm doing in my present life that
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it have been nice if his camera could have been there to capture it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are cool. I mean, I have an ornament on my tree still from I won't tell you the year, but it's when I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
It was in the 1900s. That's all I'll say. So, so we do that all along, right? It brings us back to when we were kids, and it brings us back to different times in our lives. And the holidays especially have a lot of triggers, but also because our memories are really triggered by our senses. And the holidays have very particular smells and sounds that we don't have other times of the year, and tastes. And so that's one of the reasons why it really can be really bring us back, right? Just fold that piece of paper over and we're right back in that, here's our timeline of life, and we just fold it back over and jump back there for a little bit. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. And you all can just jump in whenever you want to. I won't even put any of you on the spot, I promise. Okay, so then the power of the present, right? So we talk about, we think about the past, the present, and the future like a three-legged stool, and I always think, okay, well, if you're spending too much, if you don't have one, if one of them doesn't exist for you, right, then you're not really balanced and ready for things that life throws at us, like a big wave of grief or a big order to stay home and shelter in place or whatever. So we have to balance it out with the power of the present. So the present is great, right? We hear all we in our culture, we very much value like being in the moment. We value mindfulness. We value meditation, and all of those things are really good. It's important that we live in the present so we can fully engage in life. And it gives us more optimism, gives us more life satisfaction, and helps us, right? If we don't do cool things in the present, then we're not creating things to look back on. We don't have, so the things that you're doing today are those memories that you're going to look back on. So we don't want to think that our past only exists, from maybe the time that they passed away and back. That's not our marker. We're everything you're doing today, you have to keep doing those really cool experiences and keep traveling, like Sandy was saying, or keep doing whatever it is you want to do so that you're creating those things that you can look back on, right? So today's experiences are tomorrow's memories or something, whatever. There you go. So let's go to the next slide. So here are some examples of present focused activities. Oh, this is some of the ways we do that, sorry. So meditation, ritual, point of focus, focus on your senses. I don't know if you've ever, like some meditations will say, grab the, do this or taste this or whatever, like sit still for a minute. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What are the senses? Focusing on your senses, and remembering what's valuable to you now and how those values have changed. And so being still and doing some meditation. I think I shared on an earlier call, there are a whole bunch of, I think the Calm app might have some promotional things right now that has lots of meditations. We have Peloton, it has 90 days for free right now. And one of the things they have on there is meditation, along with lots of exercising things, right? And there are 5 or 6 Buddhas something, but there are all kinds of different meditation apps out there right now that are really trying to help people. So maybe, look into some of those. There's some harm in spending all of our time in the past, but there's some good about spending a balanced amount of time in the past, right? So there's some harm in just being present focused too. If you were just present focused, you might, then we're just living for the moment, right? Not thinking about consequences, not taking in lessons that we've learned. So the next page gives us some examples of things that we're doing that are present focused. So again, there's a little picture of a notebook on here, so that you can think about what are some of these things that you're doing, or what are some of the things that you do to stay focused in the present, especially maybe times like now where it's hard not to be a little bit overwhelmed by worry about the future. And so what can we do to stay focused in the moment that we're living in right now? So if we can go to the next slide. And there's a little notebook up there, so you can, here are some examples. Oh, so like Netflix binging is totally a present oriented activity, right? We're not really thinking about the future. We're not really thinking about the past. We're just like, you get in there and Netflix starts getting snarky with you. Are you still watching, whatever, Dexter? Yes, I am. Thank you. But you can kind of just get engrossed in something that's totally not your life and let go of the thinking about the future and thinking about the past. Anytime that you laugh, anytime that you find something that makes you laugh, anything that's restful, thrill-seeking behavior is generally a present focused activity. We're not worried about the long-term consequences. We're not thinking about the past. We're just being in the moment. So anything that's instant gratification. One of the things that we found with widowed people in our research is you don't have to laugh and be happy, right, to be resilient, but it is important that you can find a way to be able to laugh in the moment. So you have moments of joy, which doesn't mean that you're not sad and doesn't do anything to dishonor your person, but it's really important that you can find these moments where you can just let go and be in the moment and laugh and not feel guilty about it, right? Does anybody ever feel guilty when you're having too much fun? Yeah. And so we know that a resilient behavior is just being able to laugh in the moment. I can laugh maybe once a day. You find something that you can just laugh out loud at. So maybe make a note. So write down a few things, and then if you don't mind sharing a little bit on chat or out loud, if there's anything that you really have found has helped you, especially maybe now, again, when we're kind of, there's a lot of worry about the future or uncertainty about the future. What are some things that you're doing that are helping to keep you kind of grounded in the moment right now? Ooh, yoga. Nice. Mm-hmm. That's right. You said you did some yoga this morning, right, Nicole? You got some in this morning.
I did, yes, I did some this morning. And so I'm gonna do a little plug. There's, of course,
Good.
YouTube has all kinds of free stuff out there. I don't know if you guys know Yoga with Adrienne. She's fantastic. I think she's fantastic. She's very like down to earth, and her dog Benji's in like all her videos too, but he's like sleeping in the background. But she's I like her because she's very listen to yourself. Her motto is find what feels good. And so I love that because with her videos, like I know I can push myself to where I'm comfortable, not to what the teacher says, because the teacher, she's saying find what feels good, do what feels good for you. And I feel like especially now, that's what we have to focus on is what feels good for us, what serves us, not what serves everybody. And another little plug, she does have a video that's yoga for grief. I'm not saying it's going to cure grief or anything, but it I love it because she uses like all her techniques on breathing and everything to slow your nervous system down and just breathe, just take. And I think it's like 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And I do it when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed or if I'm like emotionally sensitive. I feel like, because I feel like not every, I know I'm talking a lot, but I feel like not every day am I, you know, and I hate to say sensitive because it's not like I'm sensitive, but I guess maybe more emotionally sensitive. And it's those days where I need to like take a little extra care for myself. And so she has that yoga for grief video, and I love it because it really is like just slow down and just be with yourself and focus on yourself. But all her videos are pretty cool, and she has like a monthly calendar. I think March is all about creating and being creative, so it's but anyway, there's my
It's
little
called Yoga with Adrienne.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. I think Sandy's focused on something in the present. Are you knitting? Are you sewing? Knitting?
Me?
No, Sandy said, I think she was trying to unmute there.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
So it's needlepoint, and I've actually, it's a hobby that I've really leaned into since Lennon passed away, and retreats with others who do it have given me opportunities to travel solo, but
Oh, interesting.
Go into arenas where I know before I arrive that even though I'm quote alone, I'm together with like-minded people that enjoy the same thing. So a group of us were supposed to be on a retreat next weekend, which has obviously been canceled. So we're getting together via Zoom tomorrow afternoon. So
nice.
yeah,
A little maker space on virtual.
exactly. Yeah, just connecting virtually. So
yeah. One of my friends just taught me how to knit recently, and I'm not good. I can make really good rectangles. And so, that's all I want to do. What are you doing, Courtney?
Scarves are great. All they are is really long rectangles.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do anything aside from squares and rectangles. So I learned how to crochet. One of my fellow performers at work taught me a while ago. And I use like the really thick plush yarn.
Ooh.
And if I can find my hook.
Do you order it online? Because I've looked for some of that big yarn before, but.
It's the Lions brand Thick and Quick, the woolies.
Okay.
And it's a really, really nice thick plush yarn. I use a really thick crochet hook. So, and I do like a double crochet stitch. So it's a nice, chunky, soft, kind of heavy blanket.
And it's like also giving you comfort while you're creating it.
Yes, this is I actually one year for Christmas I made all of the girls at my stage scarves. Now everybody wants a blanket.
Nice. I love it. That's gorgeous.
So I have to share. I did I've been crocheting as well. Here's my latest.
See,
crochet.
you're fancy.
Oh my gosh.
It's the same exact thing that Courtney was talking about, the double crochet. I just used a lot smaller yarn and a bunch of different colors.
Yeah, that's patience. But mine's like, I want to finish this now.
Yeah.
So I can do like a scarf in like an hour or two if I use the thick stuff.
You could probably even order stuff to knit or crochet. And I like to do anything that I don't want to count, right? Like I don't want to have a pattern where I have to count a bunch because usually I want to check out a little bit. But I bet you could order stuff online, have it delivered, and watch YouTube videos. I also find exercising brings me right into the moment, because sometimes I would like to go away to my happy place when I'm exercising, but I can't. And it's one of the things that really works for me as far as being really located in the present. Okay, good. So let's go on to the next one. So the future, of course, it encourages us to dream and have hope. And as I mentioned before, one of the things about hope is the way that we know that we have hope when we're researching it is if we have goals for the future and we have plans for the future. And it gives us just a place to go where we can imagine, and we don't have to deal with all the stuff that's happening today. I can imagine a future where I can go outside and hug my friends and see my family and go to a concert again. And it encourages us to have healthy behaviors, right? Because if I'm only focused in the present, I'm just going to sit home and eat bonbons or whatever people sit on the couch and eat, right? Doritos or whatever. That's my weakness, is Doritos. So improving our health behaviors, anything that has delayed gratification. So on the next screen, we have some more examples of these future focused things, activities. And thinking about thinking about short-term and small dreams that you have first, and being flexible in terms of thinking about the future. So if you have your pencils, but some of you I know are making stuff. So if you're knitting or needle pointing, you just go right ahead. But I want you to think about, on the next screen, what are some of the things that you are doing that are future focused? So if you're paying a mortgage, that's future focus, right? It's delayed gratification. Anything where you have a short-term sacrifice for a long-term payoff. If you're exercising, if you're meal planning, going to school, studying for a new, something so you can get a promotion at work. Anything like that where you have that hypothetical happy future life with meaning is possible, that you believe that it's possible. So think about some of the things that you're planning. If you book a vacation is, normally one of the things we talk about, which I know right now is uncertain, but maybe booking those maker spaces on virtual, those Zoom meetings or whatever. Anything where you're planning, like, oh, let's get together once a week. Let's get together and talk about this. Okay, so let's go to the next one then. So when you take a look at all of those things that you have, it's important that we figure out how to make bring our past with us, to live in the present, and also dream for the future. So that last picture, the future, the ribbon cutting, that's the Schreiner University, in the entrance, the Soaring Spirits entrance to the building that has the Resilience Center in it. There's right when you go in there's this nice sun porch with some pictures of our people up there. It's pretty cool because my college students get to see that widows are not all the same. We're not all a bunch of sad, 98-year-olds. But we look a lot like them sometimes. And so it really personalizes that for them. And so then you have to, I want you to just think about, what time orientation do you normally spend your time in? Do you feel like you're, pretty balanced? Planning for the retirement and being fearful of the future. Yeah. Especially once again, right? We don't know what's going to happen economically. And so right now probably is a really good time to be in the moment and make some plans for the future, but where we're planning on, okay, well, how am I going to use this time? This kind of forced time where I have a lot of self-reflection time to make some plans for the future that I know I do have some control over. Because right now there's so much I know that we can't control, which is, once again, where widowhood comes in, because we know we're familiar with that experience, right? We know that we can get through that. So next slide. What is it that you feel like when you're out of balance? Oops, sorry, one more. If you're spending too much time thinking about the future, you probably feel overwhelmed, right? Or maybe if you're spending all of your time thinking about the past or the future, but depending on how your outlook, you might feel really sad. If you're spending all of your time thinking about the future, you probably have a lot of anxiety. Maybe some hopelessness. If you're only spending all of your time in the present, you're probably taking some risky behaviors or engaging in some risky behaviors. We might not feel like you have control, so you're not thinking about the future, so I'll just live in the present, and whatever will be maybe. If you feel a need to be busy all the time, it's possible that we need to balance out our time orientation a little bit. right? Because you feel like you have to keep working, 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 and you're only thinking about the future, instead of spending time connecting with your past and spending time just being in the moment. So do you feel like, do y'all feel like maybe it's hard? I mean, it's probably hard to kind of spend too much time in the future right now, but maybe if we can spend time in the future, like thinking past the end of this kind of situation that we're in right now. Do you have anything y'all want to talk about? Maybe some feelings from anything else that you talked about today, about maybe some good rituals for the past or ways to plan for the future, or how to be in the moment if you feel like you're out of balance. Y'all feel great? No?
I definitely feel like I'm out of balance right now.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time still in the past. It's been 18 months. And the the one thing that I do to memorialize my husband, he drove a race car locally. So I have a race for him. And so I do, like, my future is fundraising for this race, but it's still related to the past. So it's like, I'm not really, it's not really a future activity, even though it's a, I have a amount of time that I'm working towards this goal.
It is, that's really cool because that's really that is integration. That's you living out integration. You're bringing that past with you.
I felt like maybe it was a double whammy since it was in the future, but it's still the past,
It's bonus. It's not double whammy. It's double bonus. Because that's good, right? Because for me, integrating my past, present, and future ended up looking like this. I'm bringing my past and my story with me into my present, which was for me to go to school and learn about this, and then help get resources to widowed people, because in 1999 we couldn't Google it, we didn't have online groups, and I was so frustrated trying to find resources. So for me, that's what it looks like, and planning toward the future with the Resilience Center, or with just and I keep integrating my career with my life experience. I joke sometimes at work, they call me Dr. Death, right? Because if somebody dies on campus, or somebody knows somebody who dies, they're like, hey, would you mind having coffee with that person? But that's okay. That's part of, that's part of my experience that I bring with me that makes me stronger. So, oh, Sharon, I'm so sorry. So, and this is a time of overwhelming risk, right? And making decisions about, like, I don't know, am I supposed to go to the grocery store? Am I supposed to go to work? Should I go, can I visit friends? What can I do? And again, a lot of uncertainty. I know this is an especially hard time, which was like, especially a good time for us to be able to making these connections in our community. Because you have people that you can talk to who kind of get how this whole situation is bringing up your past also, right? So like, even for everybody, there's anxiety and there's this uncertainty, but then we have this whole other layer of like, oh shoot, I remember being widowed and having my whole life turned upside down and having to reforge connections in a different way. And I've done this before, but also like, it makes me feel like I just got dumped right back into that place a little bit. So it's especially hard and especially empowering to know that we have done it before. But I know it's especially hard, and I have a couple of other people who live here with me, so I'm not in my house all by myself. And I know some of you are, and I know that that's really hard. Hopefully you're like getting more familiar with Zoom technology and we can call and chat with each other. Maybe it's not quite the same. I know it's not hugs. Let's do the last slide and then we can get those PowerPoint slides off of the screen. Just a reminder, so just thinking about work hard when there's a mission to be accomplished, but play hard when the work is done. And I think right now, maybe even that living in the present, hopefully you can find some things that you can play at a little bit in this time. And maybe it's needlepoint and maybe it's crocheting, right? It doesn't have to be something silly, but maybe planning for something in the future can also take away some of that anxiety about what we're living with right now, because we know it will be over. We just don't know when and what that's going to look like.